This video and all of its contents, including any opinions expressed by the narrator, are strictly for entertainment purposes only and is not intended in any way as a substitute for professional services and consultation from a licensed therapist, doctor, attorney, or other licensed professional service provider. Each person must make their own life decisions, and those decisions are theirs. Welcome back to Find Your Alpha, a channel that's listened to by men and traditional women all over the planet. Today we are back at you with another great video story, and you can see the title right on your screen, Cheating Girlfriend Demoted to an Occasional Hookup Partner. Oh no. Let's get into this story and find out what it's all about. And this is the original post, and she starts out and she says, "I'm writing this to see if my current relationship is worth holding on to. I want to start by saying that I accept full responsibility for what has happened in my life as it pertains to my boyfriend. I'm not trying to pass blame, only looking for advice from people other than my friends and family. I've created this new account and will be using fake names to keep things confidential. I'm 23, Zoe is her name, and my boyfriend is 23 as well, Zeke. Until recently we were exclusive, and I still am with him, but for the past couple months, he's been dating other people. We met at college prior to the start of my junior year, his senior year. We clicked right away and started dating immediately. Zeke lived in the dorms while I lived off campus with two roommates who I'll be referring to as Dina and Crystal. I met my roommates after Dina posted an ad in our school newspaper looking for two female roommates to share a 3-bedroom apartment. I answered the ad, we met up, hit it off, and moved in together at the start of my junior year. We got along pretty well, even though we are so very different. Dina and Crystal are free spirits in every way, and she has that underlined, while I was far more reserved, very reserved actually. At first their behavior concerned me, but over time I found them both to have good hearts and to be fun to be around. I must admit, though, I never fully accepted their lifestyles, and as such never fully trusted them. This wasn't a big deal during my junior year, as Zeke was still in school and he and I spent nearly every day together after school. We had a daily routine of studying, eating together, and being intimate. It was wonderful, and that year is probably going to go down as the best year in my life. After Zeke graduated, he landed a good job and moved to a city located about 90 minutes from our college. During this time, I traveled to his place every Friday evening and stayed with him until Monday morning, then drove back to school. During the week, I spent most of my time studying, as I was taking extra classes in order to graduate on time. My roommates were studying too, so we didn't hang out much except for Thursday evenings, which is kind of a big party night at our school. Well, I think it's a big party night at most colleges. We'd normally go out and eat somewhere, and then go to a bar after and hang out and talk to people. I normally would stay for an hour or so and then head back to the apartment as I had an 8 a.m. class on Friday mornings. Dina and Crystal didn't have classes on Friday and would often stay out well after midnight or stay out all night. Neither of them had a steady boyfriend, so it was not uncommon for them to bring guys back to the apartment on Thursday and over the weekend. I didn't care as long as they were quiet and stayed in their bedrooms. This was a rule we all agreed to, and they didn't violate it, though I could hear faint noises from their rooms if I didn't wear earplugs, which I often had to do. Both Dina and Crystal had multiple guys, who I guess you would classify as friends with benefits. Now, when I say multiple, I'm not talking dozens. Dina had 3 semi-regular guys she'd bring over, and Crystal had 2. And what I say to that is, I mean, these women being with multiple guys at the same time. I'm not saying, hey, they're all hooking up together, but they're seeing this. Dina's seeing 3 different guys, and this Crystal is seeing 2. That is just unsanitary and gross. She goes on and says, they also had one guy who I'll call Glenn that they shared between them. Not at the same time, but they both shared this guy individually. They knew it and were cool with it. Oh boy. You know what I got to say about these two women? I mean, they are STD factories. These kind of women, even though they may seem tempting because, they're going to give you that good stuff. I recommend just totally staying away from women like that because you don't want to go near them unless you have a full body hazmat suit on. I mean, it's just too dangerous. Glenn was a junior and plays on the hockey team. He's not at all smart. In fact, he's a terrible student, but the athletic department works it out. So he somehow passes his classes. So this guy probably got a scholarship, I'm guessing, for hockey or some other sport, and he's a terrible student. So they're just passing him along so that he gets to play hockey there. That's what I'm reading from this. She goes on and says, Glenn is not good looking in any sense, but he's tall and has an unnaturally muscular body. He's also known for having an attribute that is much more significant than other members of his gender. She says, I'm keeping things PG here. Dina and Crystal have been with Glenn multiple times. Now listen to this. She says, he basically has an open invitation to drop by whenever he wants, and if one of them is available, they will sleep with him. Both Dina and Crystal told me several times that he has expressed an interest in being with me too, though he never approached me. I, of course, rejected this and told them I was really offended by his suggestion. This brings me to what happened in May. It was a Friday. The school year had ended, and it was our last night together as roommates. We made it through college. To celebrate, Dina, Crystal, and I made plans to have dinner and a little fun that night. I told Zeke all about it, and he was fine with everything as he trusted me completely. I texted him all night letting him know what I was doing. Zeke and I had plans for a special celebration of our own Saturday night when I got to his place. Now back to Friday. We took an Uber to the restaurant, and then from the restaurant we went to a campus bar where a lot of our friends were present. We stayed there until the bar closed, then Ubered back to the apartment. Though I normally don't drink, that night I did and way too much. I started with a banana daiquiri, but don't remember all the other things I drank except for the flute of champagne we all had to toast our graduation. I'd never been drunk before and didn't realize how much alcohol can affect your judgment. So you can already see she's pointing out what I'm about to do. It's probably because I was drunk. When we got back to the apartment, Dina, Crystal, and I sat in the living room and talked until their guys got there. When they did, they each went into their bedrooms. I was left all alone in the living room. I was so out of it that I flipped on the TV and decided just to curl up on the couch with a blanket and sleep there. I had just dozed off when there was a knock at the door. I went to answer and saw it was Glenn. Here comes Glenn with his big unit. I let him in and told him that Dina and Crystal were already in bed. He started towards Dina's room, but I told him that they both were already with someone. He said, "Bummer," and came into the living room and sat right down on the couch where I had been laying. He started talking to me about my plans after school and a bunch of other stuff. After about 30 minutes of talking, he kissed me. So she must have been sitting right beside him on the couch. Now, if he went and sat on that couch, why didn't she go sit somewhere else on a chair or somewhere? I resisted and explained my situation with Zeke. Glenn apologized, but said he wanted me desperately. I told him no. I was exclusive with my boyfriend. Do you think she really told him that? I wish I could say that's where things ended, but they didn't. We talked more and then he started kissing me again, and this time I kissed him back. We didn't have us, but I found out later that I apparently did do something to him that night. I fell asleep on the couch and Glenn left sometime during the night. In the morning, I woke up with a headache and the previous night was all a blur. Dina and Crystal were still in bed and their guys were gone. I made coffee and the smell woke them up. We started talking and laughing about last night. Then Crystal asked me how I like being with Glenn. I didn't remember him being there, so I questioned what she meant. Now, she says right here, I don't remember him being there, But then she just told us that she remembers kissing him and him kissing her first. So, get your story straight. Crystal said Stacy, the guy she spent the night with, said she saw me giving Glenn blank and you know what that means she was giving him. I told her that wasn't true and said I just fell asleep on the couch. Crystal said, "Oh no you didn't." She said Stacy came back in her bedroom after using the bathroom and told her what I was doing. She said they both crept back out and watched me. At this point, I lost it and screamed at Crystal asking her why didn't she stop me. She said it was none of their business and that I was clearly enjoying myself. I told her I wasn't enjoying myself as I didn't even remember it. Crystal told me I was fully aware and was loving it. I started crying and begged them not to tell Zeke about this if they ever saw him again. They told me not to worry and they had my back. After this, I went in to take a shower and cried my eyes out regretting what I'd apparently done. When I got out, I called and talked to Zeke. He stayed on the phone with me while I packed up my stuff. Then Dina, Crystal, and I left the apartment at the same time and decided to grab lunch before leaving town. About an hour later, as the three of us were sitting at an outside table, I got a call from Zeke. He asked me if I was somewhere where I could access my phone. I said yes. He said he had something he wanted to send me. I asked him what it was, and he said you'll see. He said to take a look at it and call him back to discuss it. I said okay and waited and waited. Finally, after we had all finished eating, I got a ping on my phone. I glanced at the message and couldn't believe what I saw. It was a picture of Glenn sitting on the couch without clothes with me kneeling in front of him. I was destroyed and just started crying. I didn't say anything to Dina and Crystal and just got up and ran into the ladies' room. They ran after me and found me crying in one of the stalls. I started screaming at Crystal asking her how she could do something like this to me. She asked what. I told her about this picture. She swore she hadn't taken the picture and hadn't told anyone about me and Glenn. We then figured that it must have been Stacy but wondered how he found Zeke and why he would do this. Crystal said she told Stacy I was in a relationship but nothing more. We figured he must have found Zeke on Facebook or Instagram. Crystal said she didn't see him take the picture and said he must have taken it before coming back into the room. She said Stacy hates Glenn, so that might be why he did it. She said he probably did this to try to get back at Glenn somehow. I asked why would Stacy do this to me? I'm the only injured party as a result of this whole thing. So she's saying she's the only injured party, not her boyfriend who she just cheated on the previous night, but just she is the only injured party. They stayed in the restroom with me while I cleaned up and settled down. We then went back out and talked for another hour as they helped me contemplate what I was going to tell Zeke when I called him back. So she's saying we all were discussing how I could spin this story and get out of this mess I'm in. Eventually, I got back to my car and called Zeke. He answered and said hey. Initially, he didn't seem upset at all. I told him I was so sorry about the picture and for what I had done. I explained that I was drunk and couldn't handle it. I then told him that I honestly didn't remember doing anything with that guy in the pic. Zeke told me I looked wide awake and very enthusiastic in the picture. I started crying and kept telling him I didn't remember. He said okay and didn't say anything else, but I could tell he was getting emotional as his voice cracked. I told him I was going to start driving his way, and he told me not to. I asked why, and he said you know why. He then said he was breaking up with me. I pulled over and begged him not to do this. I asked him to let me come to his place and explain everything. He said what else is there to say? I told him I had a lot to say. With that, he said thanks for all the good times we had. Good luck and hung up. I called him back and he answered. I asked him to just talk to me and he again said there was nothing more to say and for me not to drive to his place because he was leaving for the rest of the weekend. I asked where he was going and he wouldn't tell me. I hung up and drove to his place anyway. When I got to his apartment, He wasn't there and didn't respond to my calls and messages. I waited in my car outside his apartment for over 2 hours before finally giving up and driving to my parents' house an hour away. On my way, I called my mom and told her what I'd done. "So you told your mother everything?" "Oh boy." She screamed and yelled at me as I drove, and I cried the entire way home. She called me a bunch of names and said she was ashamed of me. Mom did, however, agree not to tell anyone about this, including my dad, as he would never forgive me or see me the same way again. We decided to tell him Zeke, and I just grew apart and broke up. That Saturday will go down as the worst day in my life. After I got to my parents' house, I talked to my mom for a while and then went up to my room and called Zeke. I explained to him that even though I was in that position in the picture, I didn't think I actually did anything. "Oh, come on." He interrupted me and asked me to stop lying, saying that he also had a 50-second video of me enthusiastically performing the act on Glenn. So she's totally busted here. I was so upset I just hung up on Zeke and let out a scream of desperation. My mom heard me and came running up the stairs as she thought I had done something to myself. I explained to her that I had just talked to Zeke and there was a video of me. My mom said we need to report this to the police as this is a crime. I told her I didn't want to, as I didn't want the attention or embarrassment. I then decided to call Crystal and get Stacy's number. I called him multiple times and left him messages to call me back, but he didn't. Finally, I had enough and sent him a text and said I was going to report what he did to the police if he didn't call me back in the next hour. 5 minutes later, he called me back and started apologizing. I asked him why he did this to me and told him he ruined my life. He said he did it because he hated Glenn and also he felt that my boyfriend should know. I told him what he did was terrible and he could have just told my boyfriend without taking the picture and video. I asked him who he shared the media with, and he swore to God that the only person he sent the images to was Zeke. He went on to say that Crystal knew nothing about the picture or video, and that he found Zeke on Instagram after looking at my profile. I asked him to send me the video, but he refused, saying he was going to delete both the video and picture off his phone and off his cloud right then with me on the phone. I told him to send me a screenshot confirming this, which he did. He also sent me a text message apologizing and again saying he deleted the media. I responded with a text saying if I found out that he still had the images that I would file a police report and press charges against him. He called me back and swore that he had done so and again apologized. While I was not happy about the situation, I felt so much better and somewhat relieved after talking to him. So there I was expecting to be engaged sometime that summer, and instead I was all alone due to a stupid lapse in judgment. During June and July, I tried everything to get Zeke back or at least talk to me, but he never responded. I was in a complete depression. Thankfully, during this time, I was able to land a job at a company I wanted to work at. This kept me going and helped me get through. I had reached a point when I had all but given up on trying to contact Zeke, but then I decided to call him on his birthday. I wanted to be the first person to wish him a happy birthday, so I called him at 12:01 a.m., and to my surprise, he answered. I wished him a happy birthday, and we talked for nearly 2 hours. I begged him for another chance, or even for just one final time together for closure. He explained to me that there's no chance for us as a couple, but to my surprise said he would be interested in getting together one final time. So old Zeke wanted to get a little bit here. He said he missed my body, but made it clear we would only have to do it for pleasure and nothing more. I was all right with this, as I thought it was a good first step. Zeke then asked if I'd been tested and asked me to send him the results, which I did. He then told me to come to his apartment Sunday evening at 6 p.m. He said I should not pack a bag as I couldn't stay over, but we could spend a few hours together. I went, and we had a wonderful time. It was both beautiful and passionate, just like we used to be, actually even better. Before leaving, I told him to call me whenever he wanted, and I would drop everything and be there ASAP. So that's what I've done. Over the past 3 months, we've gotten together 7 times, mostly on Sunday evening, but one time on a Tuesday, when he had the day off. I thoroughly enjoy each time we've been together. I think it's because I love him so much combined with the fact that no one knows we're seeing each other except he and I, which makes it feel like we're sneaking around. He's made it clear that he's seeing other women, and I know he is, as I've seen pictures of him out with women on his Facebook and Instagram. He's explained to me that he'll never again take me on a date and to not expect anything more than we have today. So he's telling her right there, hey, I'm not even going to take you out on a date. All you're going to do is when I want it, you can come over and we can hook up, and then you're going to leave, and that's it. Don't expect anything more. Hearing this hurt me, but I kept going back. Now listen to this. Before each of our get-togethers, he makes me send him a text asking him if I can come over to have sex with him. Like a fool, I do it every time. One day I forgot to, and he wouldn't let me in his apartment until I sent him the stupid text. He said he does this to protect himself in case I try to falsely accuse him of something, which is ridiculous. This brings me to my dilemma. On one hand, I know I'm just being used, but on the other hand, I still have that connection to him, and thus still have a chance. Ladies, what would you do if you were me? Have any of you been in this type of relationship, and how has it worked out? For the guys out there, I'd like to hear from you as to whether you think Zeke is just playing me, or if by him letting me back in his life, even for just physical contact, is a sign he wants me back. Thanks for reading my story, Zoe. So that's her original post, and now we're going to take a look at a few comments she got back from the community. But before we do that, I want to remind you, if you're liking what you hear, hit that like button right now. That will ensure this video gets seen by people all over the planet. Now, let's take a look at some of those responses. The first one's from a guy. He says, let me say you are a vile and disgusting person for what you did, and you deserve everything you're getting now. With that said, for your sake and for his, I think you should stop seeing him and go your separate ways. A real man will never forgive a cheating woman. He may keep you around a while for pleasure, but eventually he's going to dump you. Is that what you want? The next response is from a woman. She says, he's using you, can't you see that? Yes, you made a terrible mistake, but it's time he gets over it now and either accepts you or moves on. What he's doing now is a male version of monkey branching. He's just keeping you around to fill holes in his dating schedule, but one day he's going to find a woman he wants to settle down with and give you the boot. Get rid of him, she says. The next response is also from a woman. She says this guy sounds like a psycho and is definitely toxic. Okay, here we go. He actually makes you send an email asking him for S before he lets you in. That's insane. Stop doing that. Even if he stays with you, he's going to keep throwing your mistake up in your face. Do you want to live the rest of your life like that? Take this as a lesson learned and go out and find a guy who will love you for who you are. And we've got another response here from a woman. She says, stop giving yourself to him and getting nothing in return. See, it's all about transactions for a lot of these women. You need to be getting something back from him. She says he's treating you like a common worker without getting paid for it. You're worth so much more. Unless this guy knocks your socks off in bed, what are you getting out of the current arrangement? You could be putting all that effort into finding a great guy who will treat you like the queen you are. Good luck and keep us posted. And then finally, we've got another response from a guy. He says, I think you did more with Glenn than what you've disclosed here, and I think you remember every detail because it was always your plan. I have to agree with this guy. When I read this story for the first time, I said, is that all she did was give him up? I think she did a hell of a lot more. He didn't just drop by that night. I think you invited him over. That's okay, because as women you control your body. Well, guess what? We men control who we get into relationships with, and if we don't see you as relationship material, that's our choice, and that's true. So remember that, guys. They control their bodies, but we control the status of the relationship. Now we're going to go through the updates that she has, and the first one was from just 3 weeks after her original post. She says, I'm back to give a quick update. Against the advice that most of you provided me, I've decided to continue to see Zeke whenever he'll let me. I know I'm probably crazy for doing so, but I'm just not ready to give up on us yet. As a bit of good news, last weekend, instead of just wanting to see me on Sunday evening, he asked me to come over Saturday night too and stay over Saturday and Sunday night. I couldn't believe it and was so excited. It was like a honeymoon of sorts since it rained all weekend and we ended up staying in bed most of the time, and So that's what I've got to share for now. Thanks again for the kind words and encouragement you've provided me. While I did get a lot of crude comments and hate from some low-life, or should I say no-life guys, most of the responses I received were very thoughtful. Even those who said things I really didn't want to hear. I don't plan to update again, as I'm just going to concentrate on building my relationship with Zeke. Thanks again, and be well, Zoe. Well, she doesn't end there like she said. She wasn't going to update anymore because she comes back with a final update, and she does this 4 months after that last post. She says I wanted to come back with a quick update to let everyone know how things ended up for Zeke and I. I'm no longer seeing him. If you recall, in my last post, I thought we were making progress, but then after I spent an entire weekend with him, he basically just ghosted me for the next month. I called and asked if I could come over, and he kept making excuses saying that he had family things to do, or that he had a work project and didn't have any free time. As it turns out, he was spending time with another woman. I found this out through doing some social media sleuthing. I found the girl on Instagram and saw all her posts of the two of them together. I was brokenhearted at first, but was willing to let this go, thinking now that he evened the score, we could be a couple again. Nope. The last straw was on my birthday. I expected him to at least call or text me to wish me a happy birthday, but there was nothing. I was so broken up about this that the following day I sent him a text saying I could no longer see him as it was tearing me apart. He just texted back okay. That was 3 weeks ago, and I haven't heard from him since. I think we're really done this time. I was devastated for a week and actually had to take time off work to mourn, but now I've decided to move on with my life. This weekend, for the first time in nearly 3 years, I'm going out on a first date with a guy my cousin set me up with. He's very cute and sounds super nice. We're going out on Saturday evening to grab a drink, and we'll continue with dinner if we hit it off. Wish me luck. I want to thank all of you for your messages, which helped me get through this difficult period. You don't know how much you helped me. Take care and be well, Zoe. So that's her story. Now I wanted to cover what I think are the morals of the story. The first one: if you live with pigs, you're bound to get dirty, and she starts living with these two wild women. Okay, let's just face it, these women were kind of off the charts wild. When you're around people like that and you're living in close proximity to them, eventually their behaviors are going to rub off on you, and look what happened to her. Number two, a relationship without boundaries is not a relationship at all. She stepped over the line, of course, with this Glenn, and this guy, I have to say, handled the situation like he should have. He cut her off right then. Where he made a mistake is he started seeing her again. Now, a lot of guys out there are going to say, hey, so what, she was just giving up the good stuff and she was basically just like a friends with benefits type situation. What's wrong with that? Well, I'll tell you what's wrong with that, because she could have roped him back in. Number three, guys should always, or I should say must always, wear protection and use dental dams. The pleasure is not worth the risk. Look at those two roommates of hers seeing multiple guys on a semi-regular basis, not to mention all the randos they probably took in as well, and then with her, she just hooked up with this guy out of the blue. If that Stacy didn't take the picture and the video and send it to her boyfriend, guess what? Her boyfriend would have never found out about this, and he could have hooked up with her right after. When she got to his place the following night, I guarantee she would have hooked up with him. That's why I say, guys, always wear protection. And finally, number four, don't try to repair a broken relationship. Instead, learn from your mistakes and do better the next time. That's all this woman in this story can do. Learn from her mistakes, even though I don't think what she did was a mistake. I think she planned it out. learn from her bad behavior, maybe I'll say, and move forward and do better the next time. So, those are my thoughts, and now I want to hear from you. What did you think of this story? Do you think that the guy in this story, the boyfriend Zeke, handled this situation right, or would you have done something different? Tell us about it in the comments. Also, be sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to this channel. And I was 36 when I started working at a respectable law firm. The man in charge knew my father from years prior, so that was pretty much my way in. As soon as I entered the building, I met a female attorney that won my heart way faster than should have been possible. She had curly blonde hair and big blue eyes. It was like I was speaking with a model from 1955. We started seeing each other outside the law firm 2 months after I started. I was thrilled that she wanted to go out with me. We had a wonderful time together, filled with laughter after fun. A year later, she became pregnant, and it was the happiest news I ever heard. However, her face looked mortified, and she even said this wasn't good. I suddenly realized she was probably very career-driven, so I assured her she wouldn't have to stop being a lawyer, just take a long break and return to it. We still hadn't moved in together, but now that she was pregnant, I wanted her to. When I asked, all the color left her face. She said she couldn't and wouldn't tell me why at first. Then she said she took care of her elderly mother at home, so she couldn't move out, but she also didn't think her mother would approve of a child being there. I was confused because grandmothers usually love grandkids. She also never told me she lived with anyone. Another thing struck me funny, but I just couldn't place what it was. Somehow, I knew her story wasn't true. I asked if I could go with her to tell her mother the good news and introduce myself. She got sick right there, but blamed morning sickness. She said she'd rather handle this herself. I was pretty upset and uneasy. I wanted this child more than anything, but she seemed inconvenienced and distant from me. She didn't answer any of my calls over the weekend, so I started to fear she met some horrible end, but there she was at work on Monday. I rushed to her side and asked why she hadn't answered my calls. I wanted to know what was really going on. Finally, she broke down and she told me she was married. As the thought sunk in, the room spun and I fainted. When I came to, I was laying on a bench in the law firm. My girlfriend was there. Right away, she told me her relationship with her husband wasn't that great, which is why she started seeing me. I sat straight up and asked her if she planned on getting a divorce. She hesitated. I didn't think it was because she had feelings for this guy, but because of the image she tried to present, and maybe she enjoyed the home and routine they had together. I couldn't bear to think she still loved this guy or was still having sex with him, but that's exactly what it was. She went home and told her husband that night that she was pregnant with his child. He is ecstatic and posts it on the internet. I found the post and sent him a message. I explained that his wife had been seeing me since a little over a year prior, and she knew this baby was mine. I sent him pictures of us together. After that, he demanded that she comply with a DNA test. During the time it took for that to come back, we both distanced ourselves from this woman. She was apparently willing to lie and cheat. She was miserable and even asked me if she could sleep over. I told her no, even though it was hard to say that. I knew I could find a woman that was honestly single and wanted to build a life with me. The DNA test results revealed that I was not the father. Her husband was. I didn't realize until the results came in that I didn't want to be a father yet, especially not with her. So, I was obviously keeping my distance from her and told her so. Her husband filed for divorce, even though it was his child, because there was confusion about it in the first place. She lost everything since he was able to prove her infidelity with my pictures and the whole reason for a DNA test in the first place. After she was divorced, she drove the small moving truck with her stuff to my house as a last-ditch effort to get my forgiveness. When I answered the door, she told me I went to great lengths to free her from her husband so that she could move in with me, and now the day is finally here. I just laughed. I said no way. I just wanted her husband to know she was a cheating skunk and if she was carrying my baby. Since she wasn't, we had no reason to keep in touch. I slammed the door hard. I was hurt and mad. She was lovely, and we could have been together had she gone about this the right way. Now she had no one. She tried to call or message me every day while she searched for a place to live. I wasn't invested in her story, but I was receiving updates and hate from her. She didn't seem to realize it was her own decisions that got her into this mess, and it shouldn't have been so hard for her to find her own place. She had money from her job, but she didn't want to live alone or be a single mother. The last thing I told her was that I didn't trust her to be my girlfriend, but someone else would, and when they did, she needed to be honorable and earn their trust. I also said that she shouldn't be as worried about finding a man as she should be about being a capable and prepared mother. The last thing she told me was that she should have divorced her husband and done things the right way before starting to date me. She regrets it every day and wonders where we would have gone in life. Opie, I am so sorry your girlfriend started dating you and continued dating you for a year without mentioning her husband or living situation. It's devastating to me that she dragged you through this roller coaster of a relationship, but I am relieved it didn't go on for very long. You're extremely fortunate to not have been the father of the child, because then it would have been even harder to keep your distance from her. She didn't deserve anyone's trust, that's for sure. It was good of you to track down her husband and message him. She probably would have lived out the lie that this man fathered the child, even if he hadn't. This woman seems to have learned her lesson, but thankfully that's none of your concern anymore. Now with this second chance, you can find a woman that's honest from the start and really willing to dedicate herself to you. Thank you for sharing with us. Let's now get into our second story for today. My girlfriend and I were together for 4 years. We met after both of our apartments flooded, and we were put in neighboring hotel rooms. She had an upstairs apartment, and I had a downstairs one. Since we were both evacuated and forced to take a little getaway, we got to talking and found it hard to turn in for the night. I invited her to hang out in my hotel room and watch a movie, so she agreed. We talked the whole time and realized we were neighbors for 2 years and just didn't cross paths very often. We might have only seen each other twice in all that time. I also learned that she was quite lonely like me. She was recently divorced and never had children. I had a daughter that I didn't get to see very often since she lived with my ex-girlfriend. I could tell she cared about me and it bothered her that I had a child I couldn't see very much. Once the apartments were fixed, we started visiting each other every day for one reason or another. The first time she came over and asked for sugar. The second time I asked for salt. She invited me in and asked if I dated. I said I wasn't very eager to be rejected by a woman I could easily love. That's the first time we made love and consequently began dating. This went super well for 2 years. We went roller skating, skiing, to the movies, to plays, to clubs, boating, and more. So much that I can't even remember, but it was a wonderful time. Then we decided she should move into my apartment to save on rent. She said she would love nothing more than to live with me and share a life together. It went really well for the first 6 months. During the last 6 months, she started to get really quiet. She didn't feel like having conversations with me anymore or telling me what was on her mind. Whenever we talked, it turned into a stupid argument. She started to treat me like I was stupid and she was always right. I continued going on walks with her, but it wasn't hand in hand like we used to walk. She would look around and create chit-chat with any neighbors and let me keep walking. She started waving at anyone that would drive by, which was more attention than even I was getting. One day when we were out, a tall man was standing outside our building smoking. I recognized him from before. I knew he lived in our building, but I didn't know his name or where he lived. My girlfriend started talking to him about his shirt that had a well-known television show on it. I stood there while she chatted away with this guy, and it seemed like long enough. I told her I was going back to the apartment, hoping it would make her come along too. She told me to go on without her. I was extremely upset by this. I said I wanted her to come along, but she just said she wanted to keep chatting with her new friend. I was highly annoyed now, but I wasn't going to leave her alone with this guy. I felt like she wanted me to let her go so that she wouldn't have to break up with me. I sat down and told her I'd wait for her. It quickly became awkward, but the conversation drummed on and on. This guy was interested in her and amused that I wanted her to leave him, but she wouldn't. Finally, I had to pee, so I went into the apartment. I came back 2 minutes later, and they were gone. I started screaming her name in frustration. A different woman peeked out and recognized me. She asked if I was okay, and I asked her if she knew where the tall guy lived. She hesitated, but she said she thought he lived in 215. I knocked on the door, but there was no answer. I sat in front of the door until it opened 2 hours later. It was my girlfriend. She was shocked I was still waiting there and actually scolded me, saying she had enough and wanted to break up. I snapped and said if she felt that way, all she had to do was tell me, not lead me through this emotional torment. She said she was nervous to tell me, since she'd just gone to all the trouble to move in. I asked her if she was talking about all the trouble I went through to move her in. I moved the furniture she wanted downstairs, and more importantly, made room in my heart for her. I allowed myself to trust her. I told her I took her in because I believed she loved me and wanted to be with me. She rolled her eyes and said this conversation was the exact reason she'd been avoiding me and went with another man. She said I was boring, but she didn't realize it until she lived with me. We stopped going out as much, and she didn't like how much I watched television. I told her she would never be content in a relationship as long as she lives, because it's about communication and improving life together. If she was bored, I didn't know that. I was living how I normally would, but with someone I loved. I felt like everything was fine. Instead of fixing the beautiful start we had, she doubted me. I told her to find another place to stay tonight, so she knocked on AP's door and he let her in. I was infuriated. I went inside my apartment and started carelessly bundling up all of her junk. I know I broke at least 2 things, but I didn't care. Let that be a representation of what she did to my heart. I had her stuff by my front door, but I wasn't sure if I should throw it away. All I could think about for the next 3 days was that I was going to have a hard time trusting anyone else, ever. That evening, she knocked on my door. I answered it and started putting her stuff just outside the door. While I did this, she sheepishly asked if she could stay in the apartment tonight. She was embarrassed to admit that AP didn't want her to stay in the apartment anymore. I laughed and slammed the door. I proceeded to watch her take all her stuff to the parking lot and sit on the curb. She waited a long time before someone came to pick her up. I assumed it was a member of her family that I never met, since she seemed to be expecting them and they helped her get her stuff into the vehicle. I haven't seen her since. Since then, she's reached out to me a few times pleading for forgiveness, but I just ignore it. As far as I'm concerned, she's history. OP, it sounds like your ex lives off the thrill of starting relationships, but once the magic settles, she bails because the long haul takes compromise and communication. She liked the thrills and adventure, getting to know each other, but once all was learned, she wanted someone new. It's extremely disappointing when someone gives the impression that they're capable of commitment and selflessness, but fails as soon as the other person trusts them fully. I believe the only way to avoid this is to date someone slowly, frequently, and honestly communicate, develop a friendship, and simply to the best you can to build rapport with this partner. It's not wrong to test them sometimes to see if they're trustworthy. As a matter of fact, if it's well thought out, it can help greatly. Don't be afraid to let a new partner know that you're nervous to trust them. A good person would understand and be more than willing to show you they deserve your trust. The only other thing to do is keep moving forward no matter what unexpected thing happens. I wish you the best of luck in life and thank you for sharing your story. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. My girlfriend was a very superficial girl. She was going to a beauty school to become a hair and makeup artist. I was going to school to become an engineer. I didn't think any less of her for what her career choice was. She was lovely and charming, like Snow White, and cared about the people she encountered. At least, that was what she let me see of her. I took her to a family reunion after we dated for a year, and my mom got some one-on-one time with her in the kitchen. She reported back to me, telling me to dump this girl as fast as possible. I was shocked by the impression she got and thought my mom was crazy when she told me my girlfriend was extremely rude, selfish, and inconsiderate. I just didn't see what she saw, so I couldn't bring myself to break up with her. She kept surprising me at my dorm with food, movie rentals, or games to play. She also looked forward to any chance I got to take her out clubbing. Usually, I was busy dedicating myself to my studies. I knew my college education would require sheer determination, strength, and focus. Graduation means I wasn't distracted by a woman or, God forbid, getting one pregnant. I knew my girlfriend didn't want to conceive, but she swore she could time her cycle, so there were a few times she persuaded me not to wear protection. One night, my girlfriend tried really hard to convince me to take her out to a venue that had live music and cheap drinks. I told her I couldn't and maintained my resolve. She got pretty upset with me, and I saw her face fade from smiling and adorable to a resentful frown with piercing eye contact. She left without another word, but it made me mad because she strutted out with her angry supermodel walk. It seemed obvious she planned to go without me, which made it impossible for me to focus on studying. I drove to the venue 30 minutes later and spotted her on the dance floor with another man, surrounded by sweaty people. I watched her and kept my distance while I had a drink. I was curious to see the side of her that my mom warned me about. I didn't believe she'd be so low to cheat on me. She valued me as her man and admired my mind. I thought she wanted a secure and happy future with me. What I saw proved the opposite. She was acting like the most gorgeous and newly single woman in the place. It was only a short time before she let the man she was dancing with lead her back to the bar, where they did one more shot before leaving together. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I followed his car while he drove poorly and failed to notice my tailing him. I parked just about 200 feet behind them, so I saw them go into his apartment. I knocked on the door 20 minutes later after deciding it was what I wanted to do. No one answered, even though I know they heard me. Eventually, he answered the door, and when my girlfriend saw me, she tried to look happy and calm. She said this wasn't what I thought it was, that he was actually her gay stepbrother, and they hung out sometimes. He looked at her like she was crazy. She shoved past him to leave with me and closed the door in his face. We started walking away, but AP didn't want to play along. He felt used and embarrassed. He opened the door again to shout that he was sorry for sleeping with my girlfriend, and she told him she was single. I pulled away from her, and she just kept saying that it wasn't true. I told her that even if she didn't sleep with him, I knew he wasn't her gay stepbrother, and I saw the way she danced with him at the club. That was enough for me to believe what my mom said about her. She said I was being unfair because she claimed to be innocent, but I refused to be made a fool for trusting her after this weird night and my mom's warning. I left her there, right by AP's house. She posted dramatic things about me on Facebook, that I left her in the nowhere in the middle of the night, and that I accused her of cheating when she wasn't that kind of person. I felt a little helpless about all the bashing, but I ultimately didn't care because I knew who I was and what I wanted to become. I went back to my studies and forgot all about my ex-girlfriend. To my surprise, just 4 months later, she posted on Facebook with the happy news that she was expecting. 1 hour later, she was publicly freaking out because AP dumped her and accused her of cheating. Apparently, AP couldn't have children, so he knew he was not the father, even though my ex tried to claim he was. It was a huge mess, and I'm glad I got out of the whole situation when I did. My mom was relieved too. Years later, I'm working as an engineer, and my ex is a single mother of two that never obtained her cosmetology degree. Opie, I am sorry your girlfriend proved herself to be a selfish and manipulative woman. You dodged a bullet, thanks to your mother's warning and girlfriend's telling behavior. It worked out really well to follow her that night, and it was the only time you had to, because you were too smart to be playing these games. She was extremely immature, and it worries me to think about all the men she'll probably trick into loving her. Unless, through some miracle, she learns her lesson and becomes a trustworthy woman. Now she has her kids to consider and put above her own desires. Sometimes it takes a shocking life mistake like this to realize the world doesn't bend to your wishes, and you'll get yourself into a bad place if you think selfishly or take advantage of others. Thank you for sharing your story. Now, let's get into our second story for today. I, 41, didn't realize that my wife, 35, was talking to several other men behind my back. The man she talked to the longest paid her for pictures and videos when we were struggling financially. We had 3 kids, one of them nearly an adult, and we were married for 10 years. After she felt like she could get away with talking to AP behind my back, she started making up stories for places she had to go to. One night she told me she was going to get her hair done, and she did, but it took a long time. Another time, this could have happened many times. While I was at work and the kids were at school, she spent the day with him. He was like her sugar daddy. I didn't know she was sneaking out or doing anything behind my back until I got a call from a married woman we were both friends with for about 7 years. She was crying and said she just found out her husband was cheating on her. I was shocked to hear this and told her I was so sorry. I was shocked because when I spent time with her husband, he told me how much he loved his wife. I recalled one time we were alone together and he spoke highly of his wife and then asked me how my wife felt, but then he corrected himself to how I felt about my wife. Right after this memory, she told me my wife was the one sleeping with him. I instantly understood why she was calling me. I had a vision of my heart plopping onto a platter and a fork stabbing it, then a knife cutting into it. I asked her how she knew, and she said she was holding her husband's phone at that very moment. He forgot it when he said he was going to meet some friends. She tells me she was looking at their messages right now, and he lied. He was going to meet my wife at a book club. Hearing her mention the book club made it all too real. That was definitely my wife's thing. She would go every week, but she never invited me to go. I wasn't much of a reader. AP's wife sent me pictures of what was going on while I drove to the book club. These messages mentioned times they had sex, things they wanted to do, and risk pictures. They were all about to get a rude awakening. I busted down the door and found 8 women, all intently and dreamily listening to AP, the only man in the room, reading a romance novel out loud. My wife was wrapped around his arm with her head on his shoulder. The room gasped and looked at me when I walked in. My wife jumped straight to standing, and AP looked like his worst fears were realized. I looked him dead in the eye and said his wife knew what he was doing. He could only say no, but I said yes and added that she sent me the messages between him and you. I pointed to my wife, then AP ran out the door. My wife covered her mouth, and all the other women stared with gaping mouths as this unfolded. I told her she made a vow to me 10 years ago and gave birth to my children only for our marriage to end like this. My voice cracked and tears started flowing. I told her she ruined 2 marriages and I never wanted her to come back into my home again. She very quietly said that this didn't have to happen because she was sorry and learned her lesson. I told her I didn't give a crap if she learned her lesson. That would only benefit her future, but now I had to pick up the pieces of my own life, the life that she gave up for another man. Then I left. One of the women chased me down and handed me a little piece of paper with her phone number on it. All the other women started whispering and awkwardly leaving, itching to spread the word around town about the book club breakup. As soon as I got home, I realized this building didn't feel like home anymore, just a grave of the life I was living. So I packed up the kids and everything I could over the next few days and with my brother's help, moved into my parents' house 3 hours away. This was what I needed to do while I divorced my wife and got financially situated to the point where I could buy a new home. Meanwhile, AP was divorced and moved in with my ex. They probably thought everything was going to be okay for them until they were both ordered to pay child support. But that's not all. AP found out just a few weeks later that he wasn't my wife's only lover, and after some thought, she decided she could do better than him. She moved out, leaving him broke and the sole person living in our old marital home. She moved in with some dangerously rich man. She was treated pretty well there at first, and they actually decided to have a baby together. However, while the paint was drying in the nursery, my wife's new husband cheated on her. Then he wanted the new woman to be his wife and have his babies. So he kicked out my ex, providing her the money for an abortion. I don't know if any of you guys believe in karma, but I am certain that's what happened here. My wife wanted the money and didn't give a crap about anyone else. So that's literally what she got. Temporary riches from someone that didn't give a crap about her. I've since bought a new place and remarried. I thought I should share this story to inspire people, particularly men, who were betrayed by a woman that they trusted. As much as it hurts, we are strong enough to get through it. Men are meant to take the hardest crap dealt in the world. We don't even need much to keep on going. But if a woman fails you, just get another one. I know that sounds heartless, but I was able to do just that very thing. No matter what you're faced with, always be communicative and caring while knowing your own boundaries and what you deserve. That's how you just keep surviving and functioning. Opie, I am glad to hear that justice was served to your cheating wife. There may not be such a thing as two souls destined for each other, but as mature adults, we each have the chance and responsibility to wisely choose the partner we want to commit to and love, no matter what. The person that matches us as closely as possible, among other factors. And when it seems to be getting boring or difficult, you fight to rekindle the love and commitment that you found in each other. If there are things to talk about them. That's how you solve things that are causing problems, no matter how painful, humiliating, or uncertain it is. And if there aren't any jaw-breaking problems, and there's still love in the relationship, then there's no reason to betray. Them being bored, under stress, or tempted by another person certainly is not enough to put your loved one through a tragic life event they must overcome. I'm glad to hear you've overcome this extremely difficult time in your life. Remember, you are worthy of all the love and happiness you find. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened.